Hi everyone. In this Coding Bytes, I'm going to take a look at TwinCAT HMI. Now, we're currently working on training. This training is available directly. We're going to do some training that's going to be available on the web as well. But for this, just to bridge the gap, I'm going to do a Coding Bytes, which hopefully will get you up to speed, almost like a little hello world, just so you can get yourself up and running with TwinCAT HMI, and then you maybe can go on to Infosys, find out examples from there. We've got lots of examples on Infosys, and generally the community is, and even us as support, can dive in and help as well if you need any assistance. Okay, TwinCAT HMI. I'm going to go through some slides, only a few slides, then back to my usual. Let's just do some live coding. Right, okay, so really introduction. What is TwinCAT HMI? What's it based on? So again, it's still built into our Visual Studio. So before we used to rely upon PLC HMI, but this is now being superseded. So PLC HMI still has its place, but really more of the focus is coming on to TF2000, TE2000, our TwinCAT HMI, because it's a web-based HTML5, JavaScript, CSS HMI. And it follows the same style as standard Beckhoff programming, where it all ties in with Visual Studio. It joins your project, you just add a TwinCAT HMI project into there, and away you go. Very powerful, modular, all the sort of buzzwords we'd normally hear. Really, with this, it takes that same modular approach to other Beckhoff kit. So as you bring things in, you can enable modules which allow it to do more and more. We'll talk a bit more of that when we get to it, but so much to say that if TwinCAT HMI doesn't do what you need it to do, you can start dropping into making your own modules. You've got things like server extensions. Really the world's your oyster here, and it's modular as well, that because it's HTML based, we can also take things from the web and use them in your projects too. Okay, right, typical setup. The diagrams that usually come, they used to confuse me. I myself used to be a beta tester of TwinCAT HMI, and sometimes it used to just throw me slightly when people spoke about the setup and what is a HTML client and, a TwinCAT HMI client, what's a server, where does it actually live? So in a typical setup, this is a typical setup, what we refer to is the whole thing running on one IPC. So we're all very common, we understand that the TwinCAT runtime will be living on an IPC. That's fine. What we can do is also install the TwinCAT HMI server. This is the next layer up. So we have a server which we install, just like any of our other extensions. We bring it in. This is called TF2000. So you'll look for TF2000 as a download it, put it onto your IPC, and this will allow you to serve HMI pages that have been designed in the HMI editor. So it's almost, you can see it as almost like a little runtime for your HMI, but it's not. It's a web server, and we're actually serving out web pages. Now, that server, it can run, and most of the times it'll run on the same IPC as your TwinCAT. The next thing that a typical setup will do is it'll talk about this TwinCAT HMI client. Well, the TwinCAT HMI client is actually a web browser. So nothing more, nothing less. So that's the other bit that used to confuse me, because I say, well, okay, well, what is the client? Where's that software? It's not. It's a web browser. Because what we're doing is we're setting up a TwinCAT HMI server that's going to serve web pages to you. Really, the web browser on the IPC is just going to look at itself and pull up the pages that are being served by itself. Now, that shows that there's nothing to stop you linking in with the IPC's IP address and having the pages served to your other IPCs or your laptops or your mobile phones if it's via Wi-Fi. This is where it is truly a HTML server, a web server, should I say. And again, they show this image here as the panel being connected via DVI and USB. That's just showing that this bottom part here is an IPC, and they've just got one of our panels attached to it, just so you can see what's going on. So as we say, IPC, the TwinCAT runtime, the HMI server. The HMI server is going to be doing the communication between the runtime, and it will look after then setting up the connections to the client. So this is a little bit of a breakdown here. The next thing I'm going to show you, just move this out of the way, system requirements. So starting off with TwinCAT HMI engineering. So these are really the important things, what you're going to need. With most developments you're going to be doing, if you're running with TwinCAT XAE Shell, which at the time of writing is a slimmed down version of Visual Studio 2017, this is all you're going to need. So you only really need to start heading off. They've got little asterisks about to say we need to add things to the community and professional versions of the 2017, but that's all integrated into our shell. But if you want to start doing other things, so there's things called framework controls, server extensions, this is where you start building on top of the server itself to make it do more and do functionality that we haven't put into the server. This is where you can't use XAE shell because you're going to be doing C# development in most instances. So, and that's not covered by the XAE shell. Okay, so that's just something to bear in mind, so we can use that. Typically, in all the examples I do, I use XAE shell. Anything else to notice? Yeah, so as I say, framework controls and server extensions, these are the more advanced sides of TwinCAT HMI. We won't really delve into it on this video because this is just a getting started hello world. But as I say, you're going to need a community or professional version of Visual Studio to be able to do this. The other thing I will draw your attention to is the server. The server runs on Windows 7, 8 and 10. The other thing I do know is it does run on Windows Embedded Compact as well. So we can run the server on there and serve the pages out. There are no clients that can run on this. We've tried a number of HTML5 browsers for CE and they just haven't got the JavaScript support for it. So you can use a headless CE device as a server. Not a problem with that. That can actually serve out TwinCAT HMI. But you'll need to connect a laptop, another device, a mobile phone, something to it that you can then view because there are no clients available for CE. Right, let me just drop back onto here. And I'm just going to move to some pages. Just so we can see as well some other setups. We can do multi-client setups. So this is showing that we've got an IPC running with the runtime, the HMI server. They've also included a HMI client on the IPC itself. So again, every time we say HMI client, we're referring to a browser. So we've got a browser running here. They've also got a panel PC, which is just connecting via Ethernet with its own browser, a tablet and a mobile phone. So all of them, and again, classing the HMI client, it's just a browser that can see this server. It adds a note here saying about requires client license packs. When you buy the license for TwinCAT HMI, what you'll get is you get a single client and a single target already included in that license. So again, for typical setups, you're going to be speaking to a single runtime and you're going to be having a single client connect to you. If you need to add more clients or you need to add more targets, you buy the license add-on packs for that. There we go. Again, it all works on our trial licenses, so any of your development up until the point you come to sell the kit is completely free of charge. Other things we can do multi-runtime. So a little bit of a confusing slide as well because they've shown it as a multi-client, multi-runtime. But what we're showing here is we've got the HMI server running on a PC, and as long as that PC has an ADS connection to all of the other runtimes, this HMI server can pull symbols from any of these runtimes. So there we go. We just go searching for ADS. As long as it's got an ADS root, it will be able to browse symbols and it will be able to take from multi-targets. But this does require a multi-target license, which you can buy as extra. And again, multi-clients there as well. Other things we're showing is multi-protocol. This is getting into the server extensions now. So, because what they're showing again in this picture, let me just explain the picture. We're showing a panel PC here, so that's just a standalone PC with a web browser connected. It's connecting to the HMI server just via standard TCP/IP, so HTTPS or HTTP or HTTPS. It supports both. Also behind the scenes, it does a bit of WebSockets for us. So, but you don't need to worry about any of that. That's all taken care of. They're then showing the panel PC, which is really the one that's holding everything. They also have a web browser on here, so hence another HMI client. the TwinCAT HMI server, but then I also have this, the HMI server extensions. Now these HMI server extensions are server extensions that you write. So we have server extensions too, one of them being OPC UA. So there's already a predefined server extension that allows us to not only speak ADS and pull ADS symbols from any ADS connected devices, but we've also got the OPC UA server extension, which means once enabled, and again that does come with a license, you can now find any other OPC UA devices and pull their symbols in as well. Server extensions though, going back to that point, you can write your own server extensions. They're in C#. We've got some tutorials on how to write these, but it allows you into the core of the server and write your own software. So where they're showing then third-party devices, backnet, all of that side of things, okay, we're covered by ADS doing all the ones that we normally support, but the other devices, third-party, you can write your own. Just write your own code, and then it allows the server to be able to connect to them as well. So there we go. But just remember, if you're doing framework or server extensions, you are going to need the more the community or professional version of Visual Studio. Okay. Plus as well, you enable the extensions SDK. There's a license to enable extensions. So this is really what I think this is where the term modular comes from, because typically you're buying almost standard, and then you add functionality where needed. One thing is as well, just while we're talking about licenses, it still follows the same style as performance levels. So it's just performance levels. We have no concept of tag counts or things like this, which I know is quite typical in SCADA land. You pay per tag, where no, in this instance here, it's just based on the performance level of your IPC that's running the server, not the client. So. Okay, they also show, as a last picture, multi-server configurations. So this is showing an IPC that's got a web browser attached, it's got a HMI server, but HMI servers can do HMI server to HMI server communication as well. This still takes a target license because it treats another HMI server as a target. It's not a runtime, but it's a target that the HMI server is talking to. So therefore that would be a multi-target license. There we go. Okay, right, let's move these out of the way. Just to show you where we go, just on the back off sites, and if we were to do TE2000, oops, that's TE200. Let's see if we can throw in an extra zero. I'm sure I'll find it anyway. TE2000, TC3 HMI Engineering. This is the one that we're looking for. Anytime you install, similar to TwinCAT itself, the minute you install TwinCAT XAE, the engineering environment, you get XAR thrown in for your money. Exactly the same with TE2000. So on your development machine, when you download TE2000, you can view this, you can run it, you can see everything because it actually comes with a TF2000 in the background. When you come to deploy it to your IPC and you only want to deploy the server itself with the content you've decided, you need to install TF2000, and that's what you need to install onto your IPC. Once you have TF2000 on an IPC, your development machine will be able to find it and download the content of your HMI into it, and then it's up to you to then start your web browser and typically put it into kiosk mode, something along those lines. Okay, so TE2000, documents and downloads, and then we're just going to go softwares and tools, downloads, and we are running with the latest version of 1.12. We still have 1.10 there just for some people who are still running on 1.10, but 1.12 is the way you should be going. So just download that from here, and when you install it, that'll install it into your Visual Studio. Okay, right, so what we're going to do now on this one is we're going to put together our first project. So this is only going to be running on local as well, so because typically everything that we do local, we can then migrate onto an IPC afterwards, and it's very similar. So what I'm going to do is just go File, New Project. I'm going to start off, because I want to have a PLC in the background as well, because hello world, it would be nice to speak to a PLC. I'm actually going to start with an XAE project. I could have started with a HMI project, it really doesn't matter, so either. So I'm just going to put in here, demo live, so HMI. There we go, so that's our PLC project that we're going to be bringing in. The next thing I'm going to do is just say add new project and pick TwinCAT HMI. That's the HMI project, and I'm just going to call it HMI. And you'll see it add it to the solution in a very typical way that we add everything to our solutions. Just wait for this to complete. There we go. Okay, there we go. It's starting from scratch. Perfect. So what we'll see here, so it's automatically put us onto this desktop view. So this is the folder layout. So again, we're all used to seeing the folders in the Solution Explorer. What we have here is just a set of folders. Most of the time, a lot of these folders, especially these lighter colours, they're more suggestions. So, and we can come in here as well, and we can add new folders and add our own folder structures. This is all available on the HMI server once it goes live. So it's more for you to just organise your work. We'll start with the desktop view. So desktop view is the first page that the users will be presented with. There are ways to switch which view gets called depending on the user and how they log on. Excuse me, but typically we're going to be hitting this desktop view. Now, desktop view we're going to class really as the base page, and we're not really going to be swapping web pages. We're going to be swapping content inside of the page. So when we're going to look to do things like page changing, this is going to be dealt with using a thing called content instead, and content will live in views. So let's start putting some things together just so we can see it and see some page changing for starters. So what I'm going to do is just go into here, add new folder. I'm just going to add content just so I can keep this tidy. And I'm going to add a new item, and we've got the ability to add content here. And I'm just going to call this homepage. So we've got homepage here. I am on dark view, so it does actually start with a dark background, but I will start putting some things in here just so we can see. So I've defined a home page content, and this is it here. Let me just go into view, and turn on my toolbox because I usually switch that off. What I'm going to do is put on a text block. Now this is just all drag and drop. It's a WYSIWYG editor. We do have the ability to swap into coding mode and see the HTML behind the scenes. Now, just a little word of warning there. Don't just dive straight in and start editing the HTML behind the scenes, because it is specific HTML which is developed for TwinCAT HMI. It is still HTML, it's div tags. But if you go in here just randomly, you can upset how it's interpreted, and it will throw the framework. If you want to put your own HTML in these pages, you have to do it inside a HTML container. So we've got this HTML host. Dragging that on, it's just an invisible container, but if we were to go into the code, we can now see HTML host in here, and we can now do whatever HTML we would like to do. So I'm just going to put in a h1 of hello. Okay, just save that. Swap back, and we can start seeing it's a little bit dark, but yep, we can see hello there. So pure HTML. If you want to just code HTML, and you've got the ability to do CSS and JavaScript as well, which we'll cover slightly, you do it in hosts, just to keep it away from the other HTML that's being auto-generated behind the scenes. So that's that. So let's just get rid of this for the time being. So this text block here, what I am going to do is just change the background of this content, just so we can see, so you can see it better. So what we've got is everything we select, we've got these properties, and most of the time it's exposing a lot of the things that you would expect to find in CSS. So all of the different styling. So I'm going to just change the background color and just set it something to middle grey just for the time being. And now we can see our text block, and we can see the text here. I'm just going to put home page in here, just so we can tell that the home page has been selected, and hit save. We can swap back to the desktop view, which is currently showing just the back off logo. I'm going to go into Toolbox and go down into Region, drag a region on, and we can place this wherever we like. Plus as well, it follows a lot of the HTML standards. So I'm just doing a set location here just by dragging, but we can also do things along the lines of, instead of pixels, we can do it by a percentage, so we can have it max fill, that type of thing. So for the time being, this will do for me. So this region, for the moment, it has no target content. So what I'm going to do is hit the button here and say that your target content is going to be the home page that I've just made. And that brings it in for us. This is all live updating. We've got the ability here to press the L for live view. So if we call this up, we actually get a little mini browser pop up, and this truly is live. It's no simulation. It is truly a live version of what we're currently coding. So you can see just how reactive that is. So we can actually go in here. If we have functionality, if this was live on a PLC program, you could run it. It's already running. Not only that, we have the ability to open it in Google Chrome or any of the other browsers that you've got installed. So I've got Edge. And it will open a live view in there too. This is also handy. I tend to find that I will swap to Google Chrome only because it docks this inspector window in the same thing. We still have access to this inspection window, the console log. So all of this, because it is HTML, we can just interrogate what's going on, and we can do clever tricks with it, really. So yeah, this is all available in live view. So I'm just going to shut that down for the moment. Right, so that's the first content. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to copy and paste the home page. And I'm going to go in here. I'm just going to call this settings page, because most of the time we have more than one page. And the first concept I'm going to show you is how we do binding. So binding, this is a way of changing values in TwinCAT HMI, but it's quite fundamental, because if we had a text box that we wanted to set a variable in the PLC, that's via binding. If we want to swap the content by swapping between home page and setup page via a button press, we would affect that via its binding. We write symbols. It's all via this binding and writing style. So once we get that, we're going to show the example first on this home page and settings page swapping, and then we're going to expand this out into actually speaking to a PLC. So I'm just going to go onto the settings page, open this one up, and just to make sure, I'm just going to change the color just so we can tell it's actually changing. Let's go something for a lighter blue, and change home page to setting page. There we go. Save. Okay, so back to desktop view. This only knows about the home page at the moment because in this one here, in target content, this one here is currently set at home page content. What I'm going to do now is just drag in a couple of buttons just so we can do some on-click events. Just going to drop them at the bottom. Okay, and I'm just going to call these ones properties. Call that one home. And going to call that one settings. There we go. Double clicking on any of the objects themselves will open up their preferred event. So as a button's concerned, that'll open the on press event. So what we get, we've got this ability to do this graphical version of a scripting behind the scenes too. What we're going to do is we're going to write to a symbol. The symbol that we're going to write to, we click on here and say we're going to create a binding to someone or to something that we want to write to. So we're going to say create data binding. I'm going to go into controls, and it will start showing us what controls are around. Now, I know we haven't done any naming yet, but the TC HMI region will be what it was called. I know that it was in common and it was target content. So I want to create a binding to this target content. Hit OK on that. Now that I've done this, it now interprets that the value is a content value. So it's already starting to predict what things can go in this hole. And it's given me the option now, and it said even so much so, it's going to give me the selector where I can select what content I want to put in there. So because this is the home page, I'm going to say if someone clicks on it, then write to the symbol of target content, home page content. I'm actually going to copy that as well. So when I go into settings, let's wait for the settings one to open. It's always a little bit slow on my mouse clicks when I'm recording. I'm just going to paste that one in, and again, I'm going to make that target content, instead of it equaling home page content, I'm going to set that to settings page. We're okay with that. Okay, we can now go into live view. This could have stayed open. It would have just been continuously updating itself all the time it was coding. And we can now see that we've got settings page and home page. So a couple of things that we've learnt here. Firstly, desktop view, you can class that as your base view. That's the thing that people hit when they're going to view your HMI. So don't worry about swapping too much between views, because views are kind of core. You can swap between views, but you need JavaScript to be able to do that. So there's no easier way to swap between views, although it is completely possible. That's not a problem. But really just keep view as being one of your base. That's where you're going to live. If you want pages to swap out on top, you'll do that using regions and content. And once you've got content over there, and again, we can have as many different regions as we like. We could have certain, again, these buttons are static. They're actually living on the desktop view. We can have regions anywhere, and we can swap out what's inside those regions at any stage. It's completely up to you. This is your HMI now. The other thing we've learned is that there's a graphical scripting language behind the scenes, and a way of actually getting into those, just so we can see. I did a double click before, but if you go up into here, when the button is selected, these are the properties, but over here in this little lightning icon are all the events that we can actually trap. So I've gone for it's automatically selected on pressed for me. We can edit this and we can see the code that we wrote. The next thing that has come from this is now we're starting to understand a little bit about binding. So the first thing we do is it's binding and writing. So what we're doing is we're saying, hey, bind to something. And the binding I want to have in this instance is the target content. So I want to bind to that symbol and I want to write into it. There we go. And that's it. So that's given us a setup so far, which allows you to do changes screens. The next real fundamental part of Hello World is speaking to a PLC. So because I think most people will make their way through these and typically find how to use them. We've got a fantastic page on Infosys. Once you get your head around just how complex Infosys can be, and then as long as you just go in and find that thing that you want to do and just keep your scope limited, you're not going to get blown away by it. You're back to the standard old page. Or you can always drop us an email and we can help you out on individual controls if you get stuck. So go off, explore some of these things themselves. The thing I'm going to show you now, though, is the bit that people get stuck on, and that's how to connect the HMI to the PLC. So what I'm going to do, just go inside, add a new standard project, and I'm just going to call this main. There we go. Make a new POU. Now, it's entirely up to you what way we want to go. I'm going to make a global variable list for a change. Normally I do it in main, but so GVL, and I'm just going to call this one the HMI's GVL for no reason at all, just to mix things up. My bool is a boolean, and I'm going to do my int is an integer, and we'll do one more, my string. There we go. Okay, so just standard variables. Again, because it's ADS, and in this instance we're going to be connecting the PLC to the HMI via ADS. ADS is all-knowing, so it doesn't matter if these variables are in global variable lists, if they're in programs, if they're in function blocks. Unless you've used that pragma attribute hide, ADS will find it and it will allow you to write to it. So ADS is all-knowing in that sense. So it doesn't really matter where we put these, although really you should do some best practices and maybe write to structures, or I don't know, it's entirely up to you. There's many different paradigms we can use when connecting to a HMI. Right, what the typical thing that people will fall over on is from this point here, if they say, right, I've defined some variables, and let's just drop onto, actually I'm going to move this just slightly out of the way and just purely work on the desktop view because it just saves us swapping different pages. If I pull up a text block, let's just go with a text block for the time being. So this has the ability to read symbols. It can display almost anything. It has a lot of conversions already in there. So if we give it a boolean, it will just convert it to true or false and actually say it as a string. So what I want to do is to show the value of my int in this box here. So what we're going to do is go into properties, and any property, and it really is any property that has this small box by the side of it, means that we can bind to it. So in this instance here, the text of this text box has a little box. So we just say reset. We don't want what was in there to start with. We want to create a data binding. Now, data bindings allow us to go off and find server symbols. Now, server symbols, it will show up in here as ADS, and then it will show our PLC program. But this is the biggest problem that people hit, because they get to this bit here and go, there's no symbols to link to, which there isn't. By default, TwinCAT HMI will look for running runtimes. So unless your runtime is running, it won't find them. There is a way to import, I believe it's a TMC file, into the project to learn what symbols are available, but I won't cover that in this introduction. So what we're going to do is first get the ADS up and running, so things appear inside here. So I'm just going to cancel that off, just go back onto main, and do nothing more than activate the configuration, because typically I have other projects running, and then we're just going to log on once it starts. Okay, and then we're going to play the program. Right, so at that point there, our GVL has gone live. Okay, it's got default values inside it. Now if we go back to desktop view, I'm going to select the text box. I'm going to say I want, again, this will be slightly off your screen here. It says create data binding. So it's the second one down. It'll bring up this window, and now we can see that we've got an ADS connection. It's found PLC1, it's found GVL HMI, and it's found the symbols that we're going to link to. So in this instance here, I'm going to say I want it to show the value of my int. So just say OK at that point there. We can see that the symbol has now come in, and it's now being mapped to the text. Excuse me. And we currently have a value of 0 coming through. And just to prove that that is completely live, we'll do a prepared value of 123. And we get the update. Okay, so that was as simple as it takes to map symbols from the PLC up to the HMI. If we want to write symbols back and we want to influence symbols, only a very, very small difference that we're going to do. So we're just going to go back into desktop view. The first one I'm going to do is we'll say that every time someone presses the settings button, we will set a new value of this integer, plus we might set the boolean. Oh no, we'll leave the boolean for a minute. I'm just going to set this value. So what I'm going to do is just double click on settings, or we could have gone events on press, and we're going to do another write to symbol. So just drag it straight underneath, and this time we're going to create a data binding and select my int. This time it says, okay, I know it's just a value you want to write into there, so I'm going to make that 456. Okay. Again, if we go live, press settings, oops, it's load, press settings, we now get 456. So that's now successfully taken from an event. We're writing a value back to the PLC. So now we've got two-way communication, and that's that. Other things we can do, so let's just drag in a text box, this one here. We will link this text box, so this is an editable text box. And I'm going to make a data binding, and the data binding is to my string. And OK that. So let's just open this one up. So we can see that it's currently empty, which is correct. And if I do a prepared value of hello and write that in, we get hello come back. Now, if I was to put in world and hit enter, nothing happens. So this isn't a two-way binding. This is a binding that can take from the PLC, but it doesn't know to put it back. Again, another common question that we get. So we get to the stage where I've just made something, it reads it okay, but it doesn't write very well. So we need to instruct there's some controls that will naturally set up two-way bindings, other controls which, because they don't know which way you want to go about it. Maybe you want to do some validation first. Maybe you want to do some certain conditioning before sending it back to the PLC. They purposely don't make it a two-way binding. They let you make that decision. So let's show you how you do that on the text box. So just going into desktop view again, into the text box itself, and we can see the blue of this symbol is sitting here. If we double click on that, it allows us to edit the binding, and the edit the binding is currently set to one-way binding. And what I'm going to say is it's two-way binding, and the second thing I have to say is, well, if it is two-way binding, when do we want to update? When do we want that two-way binding to take effect? So I'm going to just put on text change. So we'll just set that one now. Just go back into live view. You can see I'm not actually saving anything. It's just staying up to date with me. HMI online, hello. As I type, because it's on change, we're getting the update behind the scenes automatically. Okay. We also have one for things like user interaction finished, which is then on an enter press, on focused out, that type of thing. So, so this is again hopefully explaining to you that everything is based on binding, and just be wary that sometimes things aren't what they seem. Typically, the binding will be sufficient for what you're after, but some controls aren't sure what's the best way to bind, and therefore they take the safest option. And just remember, double click on the binding itself and you get some extra options. You get other things as well where you can say about, is it on change, is it polled, and also as well, is it one or two-way binding? So that's that. Okay, well this kind of wraps it up for what I wanted to show you, because as far as a hello world's concerned, this is pretty good. So we've got to the stage now where we've set up a project, we've set up a PLC project, and we've got some comms backwards and forwards between symbols. Let's just for completeness, I'm just going to do a button, because we do have some buttons in here. Let's just pull in a button. And this button here, we could do on press, set a symbol, and on release, set a symbol to false. So we can do true and false on the on events. But some controls as well have things like state symbol. So just to make your life slightly easier, oops, not create functional binding. I will discuss that in a moment. Create a data binding into my ball. So if it's a state symbol, this one, again, open up live view, open up the HMI in the background. And when we click and hold and let go, we now have this. And also as well, we do have a different type of button. So I'm just going to unbind that. Oops. It would help if I was on the editable version. Let's just move that away. Button, state symbol, just reset the binding. That'll take it away. And we have things like toggle buttons. So toggle button and properties, state symbol, create data binding, my ball. Okay, and then this one as well. We just open this, GVL HMI, just to view. We click once, we click again, and then we get true and false. So again, all that would have been possible had you done events and then you wrote to that symbol, wrote true and wrote false. But this is just an easier way of doing it. And have an explore through. We've got gauges, we've got sliders, all sorts of things. Again, some of the sliders, you may need to double click on them and say they're a two-way binding, because the sliders will update themselves. But if you tick editable and then slide it backwards and forwards, it may not write the value back to the PLC. It will hold it in the front, but it won't write it to the back. So just make sure that you're aware of that. So that's that. Next thing, just to show you just slightly behind the scenes, this PLC is currently running locally. And therefore, when we look inside HMI ADS, I'm just going to open this one. The runtimes, it's currently looking as local as well. Now, if you imagine, from a development point of view, I have the HMI I'm developing is running on local, and the runtime I'm running is running on local. Now, how different that is when we deploy it to an IPC living somewhere else. That IPC will have the runtime local, and it'll have its HMI local. Therefore, the settings are the same. So where people start getting a bit confused about what settings do I put in as a runtime, if you're developing with a local runtime and a local HMI, it's the same settings as if you then deploy both to a PLC. Some people may say, well, actually, no, we've got a development team who are setting up an IPC somewhere else. We're doing the HMI for it. We'd really love to be able to see the live values of the HMI while we develop. If that's the case, it's in here that you'd come in and select who you want to be the target for the development. When it's under publish configuration as default, that's who it will look for when you're doing the development of this. So when I call up live view, whatever I've set in here, that's where the ADS symbols will come from. Some people as well forget that they've been connected to a remote system. Someone turns that remote system off, and then we get a phone call saying, hey, I've just tried to bind to a symbol, and the ADS doesn't appear. We have a quick look in here, and we say, yep, we can actually do diagnostics on this. We'd pull up the diagnostics at runtime and see that it's stopped or it's just not existing. And that's typically the problem that they have. So yes, so if you're doing, again, typical setup, local development, local runtime, or deployed local HMI server to local runtime, then that's fine. These settings are all good. You only need to really come in here to start making some changes to this if you're going to deploy your runtime on one IPC and the server on another, because then it needs to know what the ADS mapping is. I'll cover that in another video, but it's not far off of just changing it in here. We actually do a thing called manage configurations, and therefore you can set up different configurations. And when you go to deploy, and just to speak a little bit about deploying actually lives up in here, HMI published to TwinCAT HMI server. It'll actually start asking you to profile what you're doing. So I'm just going to do one that's called test, because it will start remembering how you want to deploy this. Because let's say I wanted to deploy it on one of my test bench IPCs and it had the runtime local to it, then it would use all those settings. If I was to say, well, actually, no, I'm going to deploy it to my final bit of kit, I'll make a new profile called final, and I'd point to it to say, don't use those settings, use this other settings, which means you get your symbols from this other IPC. This is where we configure it. So it's all about profiles and these connections, these ADS connections. In here, publish HMI. Now, once you've got TF2000 installed on your IPC, you just come into here, TwinCAT HMI and publish. You pick your server, so the IP address of the IPC you've installed TF2000 onto, the port that you're going to use, username, again, most people are using _system administrator, and the password that you've set. You would then do a validate connection, and with any luck, you'll get a valid connection pop up, and you're ready to then hit the deploy button, the publish button up here, and it will take care of it for you. Something just to bear in mind, typically, most of the time by default, when you install TF2000, it will only accept external connections, so anyone who's not local, if you're using HTTPS. So it's got to be use SSL and ignore certificate errors, because you probably haven't set up your certificates at this point, but you're going to have to use SSL TSL, because the endpoint, there's a thing called endpoints, and it says that the endpoint, it'll accept anyone's connection if the connection is secure, or it'll accept local connections. It doesn't need security if it's going to do local connections. But if you're not running with security, you have to be local. Let me show you that, just so I can show you. This is a connection to my IPC that's living next to me at the moment. We can go in, actually, I won't be able to go straight in with this because I have no licenses on this. So what's going to be better is I'm just going to deploy this. Let's just shut some of this down just so you can see some of the steps. So I wasn't going to do this, but this is a bit of an extra. So we're now in danger territory where I'm going to go completely off-piste, and therefore if this fails, you'll see how it fails. Okay, so this one here, so I've got a little mini PLC program. One of the things that it's unable to do is to auto-detect that you're running the HMI server itself. So one of the things you will need to do is no worries when it comes to actually developing and testing, because it takes care of that for you. But when you actually need to deploy it to something else, if you try to deploy it on something else and you've only got the server running, it will say it can't find a license. So what I'm going to do is we need to set up a license for it. Okay, so first things first, I'm going to log off of local, and I'm going to pick a choose target system. Let me just go off and search for my IPC. Okay, so the 44726B is Windows C, so I want this one here. Let's just make a connection. I tend not to do secure connections. Okay, maybe, sorry, I hit 2. Let's turn that off. Put the correct password in this time. Okay, so that's the CPU I'm going to connect to just for this test. So we're connected. And the next thing I'm going to do is manage licenses. And we're going to scroll down to TF2000 and TwinCAT HMI server. And as I was saying before, right at the start, with TwinCAT HMI server license, you get one client, one target included. You then have these client packs, and you just add these as you go. So depending on how many you need, you just buy the licenses to suit. Drop back in, you'll see that they're missing, expired. Just hit the 7-day trial license, and we're going to go Z, good old capture, 52 FS, and we've just generated our trial licenses. The other thing I'm going to do is just make this go live on the IPC too. So I'm just going to do activate configuration. You can see the licenses have already updated themselves. This is the fun bit where you get to watch me just stare and wait for a connection to be made. I'm just going to log on to the PLC as well, just to make sure all of that is done and working as it should do. And hit play. I can see the IPC has now gone live. So that itself has now allowed the server to be usable. What I am going to do is just down here is just restart the server just to make sure it picks up on its license. So you can see it shutting itself down. The old version 1.10, this was just an executable you had to run. You had to run the server, and typically people put it in their Windows startup. In 1.12, it starts as a service. So if ever you need to stop TwinCAT HMI server, you can't shut it down just from this icon anymore. You have to go into Windows Services and stop the service. Okay, just so you've got that. Next thing we're going to do is go into config, just so I can show you the setup of this. Okay, I've been playing around with the CSS of this one as well, so hopefully I've used common passwords everywhere, which I have. Brilliant. Okay, so this page here, really, we don't need to go in playing too much with this page at all. Okay, but one thing just to bear in mind is in this web server tab in endpoints, you can see the endpoints that we're exposing to the outside world, and it's lucky I checked because I'm actually using 10.30 instead. I've obviously been playing with this IPC and changing settings. So this endpoint here, 0.0.0.0, means accept connections from anybody as long as they're secure. Sorry, that's not the same. I've actually removed that. So normally that says HTTPS. So no, I've just set up some unsecure connections for myself just to save time. So normally this would say HTTPS 0.0.0.0 That's the default, which means accept anybody on 1020, but they have to be secure. They have to be using HTTPS to do it. What I've done is, because I'm living outside of the IPC, I'm going to be connecting to it, and typically I just tend to be unsecure just because I'm running in a isolated environment. It's just faster. It's not faster. It's I've set myself up an endpoint of 1030 and allows HTTP connections. To add endpoints, you can just add them here. So if you were to say, well, no, I only want to have connections available from a certain IP address range, feel free. You can put them in and use the 0 as the almost the any part. Right, so 10.30, let's just make sure that is all okay. So I'm just going to shut this down. The other thing you'll notice, let's just move, it's all a bit squashed. Let's just see if I can open this out slightly. There we go. Is I'm using Firefox in this instance. So going back into the system requirements, we've got a list of all available web browsers that we support. One of the things that we don't support is Internet Explorer, so the standard. Internet Explorer, the new style, so Edge, is supported because it's based on Chromium. So there we go. So Chromium, Edge, Chromium, all completely fine. Firefox, no problem, and certain Safaris, it's all good as well. Right. Okay, so that's now running TwinCAT. We've got nothing in the HMI server itself. So let's just see if we can do a live publish while everyone's watching. So I'm going to go in and go, you've got to have something in the HMI selected just to bring up the menu. And we're going to do publish to HMI server. What was the server's IP address. Let's just move that off the edge because you don't need to do that at the moment. But this is going to be 169.168.154.151. The other thing as well, just to check, is if you are messing with ports, you just need to make sure that you expose those via the firewall, otherwise it won't find it. I'm going to turn off use SSL because I've said it's an unsecure connection, and that's why it's on 1030 instead. Password of 1, and I'm going to do a validate connection. With any luck, probably what's going to happen now, which is what has happened, is I'm running a slightly later version of TwinCAT HMI than the server I've installed on the IPC. Now, on the original versions, I'm pleased this has happened, because on the original versions, on version 10, at 1.10, you had to keep both the same. And that was it. At this point here, you'd have to log off, go and install TF2000, the correct version, and then start the process again. In this instance here, from 1.12 onwards, we auto-update the server if ever we find the server is running late. So what we'll do here is it's saying it's just found 742.5, do you want to upgrade it to 744? And we just say yes. That's now updating my IPC with the latest server. Once that's been done, it then downloads the project. So there we go. So with any luck, it should validate a connection. I'm asking too much while we're live. There we go. Connection attempted successful. Perfect. There we go. Perfect. Live example of this. This is what Coding Bytes is all about. We just take risks. We're just going to live code in front of everybody. And if there are mistakes, then that's just the way things are. Brilliant. So we've had a valid, successful connection to the server. So that's now currently talking from my local machine to the IPC. It's found the server and it's ready to deploy to it. So what we can now do is say publish. And that should start. It's a little bit hidden from what I remember. Let's just say it's going to complain slightly. TwinCAT RT 64-bit. It's actually moaning that we've not set the build environment up to HMI. Now you can continue without building the project. I'm going to say no in this instance because let's just swap it to TwinCAT HMI. May as well. It just keeps everybody happy, and it does its thing. I have left it on 64 before. I don't think it does a true build, but it still deploys very well. So, but I have had errors. Don't get me wrong. I have had errors before where you look at the errors and think, not quite sure what those errors are, and you spin it over and say, no. Actually build using the correct thing and do it right, and then it deploys, and then all the errors go away. So just bear that in mind. Right, the next thing that happens is once it's finished deploying, because it's a web server, to validate this, it says, well, hey, you're someone who can connect to it. How about I start your web browser and you dial into the HMI from here? So just to see if that works, we'll just log on. I'm just going to say no. So this is currently being served now from the IPC, but I'm connecting to it via my development environment. So because that's just one of those things. So we can see up here in the address, we have successfully connected to the now running HMI on the target device, and it should all work as what we expect. The other thing as well, we can just double check, because we're still online with this CX, we should also be able to see the, let's open this up, the global variable lists acting as it should. So this is now a remote HMI. This could have been on my phone. This could have been anywhere. If I'd exposed enough ports on the firewall and done port forwarding, I could be sitting on the other side of the planet. So it doesn't matter. So there we go. So we're controlling a remote CX via a remote HMI. Now, let's just shut that down. And you have to shut that down because we've only got a single target, single use license. Therefore, if I was going to open it on the IPC, it would moan and say, no, there's already a client connected by another license, in other words. So what I can do here is just say 1030, go to the start page. It's going to start up Firefox for me. Get the same screens and say login. And this is now it running on local. There we go. And just to prove that that's all still working, there you go. And it even left that toggle button toggled in because it is a live HMI. So it's occurring everywhere. So that's it. I think as far as a hello world's concerned, what we've done there is shown you really the basics of why you should use views. Use content as pages, do page swapping via events, and this notion of binding. We've then made our way, into the PLC itself, and the PLC, how to interact with symbols in the PLC, to and fro. We can read and write PLC variables. We've seen a little bit of this scripting language behind the scenes. It's graphical. We can do ifs and cases and anything there. And then once that's been done, we've then successfully deployed it up onto a remote IPC using standard settings, because as far as that's concerned, development and HMI development is local to each other. When we are over in the PLC over here, the PLC runtime and the HMI server is also local. Therefore, they use exactly the same settings. But had you needed to change those settings, that was in the ADS tab just down here, and we can set them up using different profiles. So it doesn't upset our development sort of workflow. We can just keep swapping back to development, use development settings, swap back to deploy, use deploy settings. It will remember it for you. Okay, right, we've got just short of 4 minutes left of the hour. So let's just, I'll try and finish on the hour. Let's just throw in just a tiny little bit more bonus content. Let's just throw some bonus content in while we're here. We have language support. So let's just show you language support really quickly. I'm probably going to blow over the hour, aren't I? As with every other coding bite I've ever done, I say they're going to be short, and they're not. Right, what we can see here is actually starting to show us we can do dual coding. We can actually do HTML coding and live coding as well. That was just by sliding this thing across. It actually docks over to the side here, but you can drag that across. Right, okay, how many extra features can I stick in before the end of this video? Languages. Let's just quickly do some languages. Let's say we had home and setting that we wanted to be localized instead. This is the term we use for localizing. It lives down here. We can add localization as well just by saying add. But if we go inside them, we can see that we've got this key value set up with translations. So what we've done, we've got some examples in. We've text1, text2 as hello world and I'm localized text, followed by hello Welt and ich bin ein, I'm not going to say it, text1 and text2 for the German counterpart. Now, using those in your project, you just keep adding key values all the way down. Using that on a button instead, when we were writing home, it allows us to write it as just a string. We could have taken the value of this, we could do a create data binding, we could have taken it from my string. It doesn't matter. We've now got a push button that uses the value of my string in there. So there we go, hello world, perfect. That was nice and easy. Likewise, if we wanted to do this to a translated text, then we just type in text1. So what it's going to do is it finds the localization. It shows it's a localization, text1, and it'll actually bring it in as the localized text once it's been done. Let's just make sure I didn't cancel that off. Sorry. Let's move off that, text, oops, text1. Okay, so hello world with an exclamation mark. Funny enough, they're the same thing. And settings, we'll just do this one as well. So let's just reset that. Text2. Okay, right, I'm a localized text. So if we're going to now do localization switching, again, we'll just find a button, use a button, and when the user clicks a button, we've got access to these extra functions that live down here, one of them being locale. We can get locale or set locale, so we can do it based on decisions. So in this one here, I'm just going to set the locale to German. Just on a push button. Actually, I'll put the toggle button as well, just so we can change it back again. So we'll do functions, locale, and set locale. And set that one back to US as default. Save these, go back into live view. Okay, there we go. So hello Welt and ich bin ein. There we go. So that's localization. That's how we do localization in TwinCAT HMI. The next thing, something you've seen occur every now and again, when I right click and say create data binding, you just can't see that. Let me just scoot this over so you can actually see it, because it's worthwhile. When we bring it over, create data binding, we also have create functional binding as well. We can actually write JavaScript, we can write, I think it's TypeScript, I believe it is. I always say TrueScript, but it's TypeScript. If we go into here and say that I can add a new folder, I'm just going to put in scripts, just to keep this nice and tidy. add new item, and we're going to do a function using JavaScript. And I'm going to be, let's just call it add 10. It's going to be a very basic function. Don't be scared off with the boilerplate here. There is boilerplate, and the boilerplate is right there. So this section here is where we write our JavaScript code. Again, use JavaScript. Head off online, research what you need to research, but this is JavaScript. This is where we can implement it. We can also do code behind JavaScript as well, which gets run instantly when the web page starts. These ones are functions, and it allows us to call these functions using the graphical language too. So this one here, you can see that the function is called add10 and it has one parameter. Down here, this JSON file, if I double click on this, it allows me to set what parameters we pass in. So I'm going to say this is my number, and it will rename the internal. I'm going to get rid of the description, and the data type is number, and oops, just click the wrong thing there, number. Okay, it's a number, and I'm passing the value in. You can do pass by reference as well. And what I'm going to return is I'm just going to return another number. Yeah, okay. It's going to ask to apply changes, and it'll ask to reload this page, and you can see it's updated it. Had we have added more parameters, arguments, they would have shown up here too. This function, all I'm going to do is return. Oops, return. What are we going to return? We're going to return my number with added 10 to it. So my number plus 10. That's it. Very simple function. There's absolutely no use to it, but it will show you that we can do functional binding. So there we go. We've made a function. It takes a number and it returns a number plus 10. Very good. Next thing we're going to do is in my desktop view, because it was a script change, we just have to click to reload now. So that's one of the only things that doesn't get an instant reload because it's a script. It has to refresh all the scripts behind the scenes. With this one here, we can now say, for kickoff, we'll just do a reset on here, and we're going to create a functional binding. I'm going to start typing in add 10, and it's come up with add 10 my number. We can actually make it a bit easier to write by clicking the little icon next to it, and the my number I'm going to put in 5 just in there, and OK that. That's that. Because it's a script, it'll only work in live view. And there we go. So we've got the value of 15 is being reported back. Great, there we go. We've just taken a function, passed in something to it, and it's now spitting out a response. And we're using that response in our live code. What's really good, though, is we're not limited to just giving it constant values. We can do things like PLC1, and it should start finding it. My integer, we can pass that in instead. We'll just save this, go live view. Okay, we've got 466, which should be 10 more than the 456 we put in there at the very start. So there we go. So not only that, and what's good about these too, I just have to make sure I'm going to do this in the right place because we are on the remote PLC, so which we are on the So because we're on the remote PLC, I'm live viewing this locally. So this is currently looking at the local PLC. So what I'm going to do is just log back out again and just go on local. It's differing from the new. Let's just know that and just put this up onto 1x64. Okay, and we just. No, I've thrown it now. I should have just let it do it itself. Let's just do this. Configuration. Sometimes, unfortunately, if you do that the wrong step, it'll want a restart of Visual Studio. But hopefully we'll get away with it. Oh, there we go. That's more than happy. So again, it's asking me to relicense my my PC because now it knows that we're trying to use TwinCAT HMI, which you didn't know before. And the development environment automatically has its own licenses, so that's why it didn't ask in the first place. It's just, no, it's going to moan at me for that. So unfortunately, I won't restart the PLC in this instance. Let's just show you instead that I'm going to swap to the, it was going oh so well, but there we go. Let's just log back in. It's different from Connected. Come on then. you're more than welcome to change it. I might have to do a restart. But there we go. That's coding bytes for you. So just proving that we are completely live. Okay, that looks like it's actually gone live now. There we go. Right, so I'm connected remotely to the remote PLC. So yeah, there we go. We're in a situation now where I want to test the HMI out on a remote runtime. So all we need to do is go into here, swap this over, point it to the CX that we're looking at and accept the changes. We can go into diagnostics, runtime, PLC, and it's currently showing it's running and it's good. Now, if we swap over to desktop view and live view and move this out of the way, we're at 10. Now, this is a great thing. So actually, yeah, by having a small issue just then and staying on the remote PLC, what we can see is now we're doing, just put 20 into here, update 30. This is the development environment now monitoring a live PLC. So that's where you change it into that ADS settings. And now you can be a developer, develop, but you're currently getting your ADS values from a live PLC instead. So there we go. So that actually, yeah, where that was starting to go a little bit haywire then, that's a good example of if you are developing on a live machine, this is how you do it. This is how you remain in your development environment and just keep developing and get live values back. And the minute you want to swap back to local, just go back into those ADS settings and just swap back to local, or use the profiles. Just swap the profile and it will automatically change it. Okay, so that was functions. There we go, blown through this time now. Themes are very, very, very good. And again, I won't go horrendously into detail with this because you're probably all hanging on for dear life now. Themes. As you can see here, we have this ability to change all of the styles of this element itself. If we were to say, well, actually, no, all my buttons need to take a certain style, maybe it's based on the company's image that you work for, we can go into this base theme and say, no, all buttons, I want all buttons colours for their background colour, and I want to override what the default style is. And we're going to go in and we'll set them to a nice red. There we go, save the changes. So base theme is red, it might take a reload and you can see there it's come through. So that's our way of imposing certain themes. And what it is because this button is set to theme, it says please use this theme. Had we have asked it to, let's just select a button and we override it and say, no, you're no longer the theme, you're going to do something different, then you just do it that way. So, but the minute you bring it back to a theme, it'll follow what you've asked the theme to do. The other thing as well we can do is inside themes, and this is also a really, really handy feature, is we can do control classes. Now, classes are very similar to HTML classes. So if I'm going to say this is important, so I've got an important class. Now, the important class is going to have the background color. We do have a search attribute in here as well. So I'm just being lazy and not using it. Background color. There we go. So my background color in this instance, we're just going to say is some form of yellow. Okay, save the changes of this. Okay. Right, so control classes. These, it just means that now, if we was to say that this thing is an important button, we can go in here to class names and say that you are important. And what it does is it takes on any of the attributes that we've defined as being important, which is great because now we can start breaking things up to say, well, you are important, you're a button, you are some form of acceptance button. And what we're doing is we're taking that poetic license away from the person that's doing the design, because maybe you've got a HMI team that strictly impose what button color should be what, and you want to just decouple that from your programmer. Then what you do is you set up your themes, you give them all of these class names to use and just say, no, if this is an acceptance button, give it the class of accept, and the accept naturally comes with maybe a blue with a slightly bigger border, that type of thing. The other thing as well that we can now do is, let's say, let's just go completely off the wall. We've already blown through our time. Let's just carry on. What we could do, this is another really handy thing. So I'm just going to keep throwing handy things in. Carry on watching if you want to watch. If you want to dive away, dive away. There we go. Or come back another day. It's not a problem. So what I'm going to do here is, let's just show you. So these are the events. These are user events. We can also trap PLC events or variable events. And we can trap anything, actually. We could trap an event based on another button being moved or something like this, something crazy. So what we've got is this custom up here. And if I say custom create data binding and I tie it back to my integer, what that's going to do is it's going to fire this custom event on this button anytime that variable changes. That's all, only when it changes. So now I can go in and say, well, I want to do something when that value changes. I don't know what it's changed to, but it's changed. That's all I need to know. So now I can do things where I can say conditionally, I'm going to say create data binding. I'm going to bind back to that integer because may as well, that's all good. And I'm going to say that if it's over the value of 100, oops, let's not enter. Then what I'm going to do is write to a symbol. And this time I'm going to pick one of our buttons. I don't know what button I'm going to use because we've not been naming them. They're common class names. And it gives us this ability to say, in this instance, if it's over 100, I'm going to make it important. Otherwise, I'm going to write nothing into it. So it's going to have no classes. Now, I don't know which button that was, but we will hopefully we'll see. So currently the value is 30, so it shouldn't be doing anything anyway. And if we put the value up to 110, just activate that. There we go. So again, it's taken away that need for me to encode writing the value of RGB. And maybe that RGB value will change, because one of the things that we can do with themes is we can swap themes in and out. So we've got functions that you can do on click of a button, on different starts. We can swap out themes. So all you do is under themes, we've got a base theme, right click, say add new theme, and now that's a theme you can swap. Now that theme may have a different color important, but it doesn't matter because that means your code doesn't change, because all it's doing is swapping in a class name that has a color associated with it. Now that's really good. If you customize your machines or your kit to your end user, you can now use themes for that end user as well. So there we go. And you're not changing any of the code because you're referencing all styling. Try and do styling using class names instead of hard coding the style. It's all too easy, and we've all done it before. It's way too easy to look at something, look at a button and go, no, I don't like that. I will go in and change the text size, and I'm just going to make the font size a bit bigger. So we're just going to make it 50. Nothing really wrong with it, but you've hard coded the style into that button. No one knows why that style was meant to be that way. If you're saying, well, it had to be bigger because it's something I want the user to have attention on. It's something like that needs attention. Make a class name called button needs attention or needs attention, and that itself have a larger font size in there, and then assign that class name to the button, and you'll naturally get it. That way in the future, if all of a sudden you turn around and say, oh, the size of that font's a bit too big, let's just make it a bit smaller, you change it under the class and all of the buttons that implement that class drop. And there we go, that's it. Okay, all right, well that I am going to wrap it up there. We're an hour and a quarter in, and hopefully that's given you enough to give you an introduction into TwinCAT HMI, and there will be more videos coming out on very specific things. So keep posted on the Coding Byte videos. Hopefully this has given you a good kick in the right direction, and I'll see you on our next videos. Thank you.